Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on a guide to revolutionizing procurement. I'm Jonathan O'Brien, and I'm going to be hosting this alongside Kathleen Harmeston and Dipesh Sudra, who we'll hear from in just a moment. It's really great that so many of you can join us. There's still people that are coming in. There's still people that are going to join. So as we get into this, I'll just do a quick introduction to how this is going to work and also how you can be part of this. So there's three bits to this. We're going to hear from our panelists in just a moment, and then we're going to do a little introduction as to what today is about, and it's your chance to ask some questions and get involved with this. I'll explain how you can do that in just a moment. But this is how the technology is going to work. There are two ways that you can communicate here. The key thing that you need to know is the Q&A feature. So the Q&A chat feature. If you want to ask a question that we're going to come back to at the end, then please use the Q&A feature, and we will then get those questions and answer as many of those as we can at the end. There's also a chat feature. If you put something on that, we're not going to respond to that, but that's if you want to message the panelists privately. If you have an issue with the technology, something's not working for you, just raise your hand and somebody can give you assistance as well. And we'd love to see those emojis. So we'd love to see those reactions from you as we go through. But let's first begin by just introducing the three of us to you. So I'm going to start with me. I'm Jonathan O'Brien. I'm the CEO of Positive Purchasing. We've been around for 22 years. We work with companies all over the world to help drive strategic procurement. And that means driving capability around category management, supplier relationship management, negotiation, and sustainable procurement. And we're known for training big companies all over the world to do that. And also through our software tools that provide the support, the processes, the e-learning, and the AI-powered tools that help you do that. So that's a little bit about me. And Dipesh, I'm going to hand over to you. Please, could you tell us a little bit about you, please?
Sure. Thanks for everyone for joining today. I'm currently Group FP&A Manager for the Rank Group. I've partnered with procurement teams in the past to manage larger spend portfolios, develop some agile operating models to enable right sizing of procurement activity, as well as aligning to broader business strategy and value creation. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Kathleen, please tell us who you are.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I'm a commercial advisor working with C-suites and executives to deliver global change in procurement and supply chain. I have over 14 years in management consulting and 10 years in operational strategic advisory roles. So having been a CPO in the past as well, I can bring quite a lot to the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we're going to hear from our panelists in just a moment. But just before we do that, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes just to sort of set the scene. But just a reminder, as we go through, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A chat feature, and we will come back to those at the end. But I want to begin by thinking about what the future of procurement is all about. And probably one of the quotes that sums it up is this, published in a recent report from A.T. Kearney. The future of procurement is led from the center, has ownership of the processes that add value, serves as a hub for innovation. To fulfill this promise, we require developing an innovative operating model and advanced capabilities. And I think that pretty much sums up where procurement is right now, because if you've worked in procurement in the last 5 years, I think it's an understatement to say that it's been a challenge. And the CPOs I've talked to have, one day they're doing one thing, one day they're doing the next thing. Because prior to 2020, the suppliers enjoyed the good times. There were these kind of golden years. We had consolidation in supply bases. We had globalization of supply chains, the way in which clients would, the suppliers' client management skills were able to maximize their position. But then as we came out of the pandemic, everything shifted, and a number of things sort of converged to be able to do that, and the remit of procurement shifted. So we kind of went from this procurement as the cost optimizers to procurement as suddenly needing to be solely responsible for managing the major risk that the organization was facing, which was around securing security of supply. And we've also seen procurement develop into this kind of value chain entrepreneurs. So one of the things that we've seen is a recognition that if the organization is going to be able to drive competitive advantage, that CPOs have been faced with this kind of sea of complexity. They've needed to find ways of being agile, and they've also had to find ways of being able to automate function. And that's led us to this forced inflection point. And that's really what today is about. So as we move forward, we're going to see two organizations that kind of shake out here. We're going to see the followers that do the same things that they've always done, the existing operating models, and those organizations are going to not make it. They're going to have a sub-optimum contribution for procurement. Procurement is not going to be able to drive competitive advantage. But a new leader will emerge, and this is the kind of pivot or perish. If organizations don't find a way of pivoting to Procurement 3.0 and being able to embrace the new operating model, then it's not going to be a function that's going to be able to drive strategic advantage for the organization. So there's a number of things that sort of come together to be able to help us, but also there's a number of things that have got us to this position. And if we put ourselves in the position of a CPO for just a moment, CPOs have been wrestling with a number of challenges, external challenges, the explosion, of course, of AI and Gen AI, machine learning in particular, and figuring out how to deal with that. Because whilst everybody knows it's there and we're beginning to understand what it can do, figuring out how to make that happen, to be able to get really good management information from previously unstructured data, to be able to get that transparency we need, and to find ways of using that to drive how we manage our supply markets. That's a different thing. I don't need to say much on geopolitical dynamics. Everybody I've spoken to in the last 12 months has been dealing with something. Latterly, of course, tariffs, prior to that, nearshoring, and being able to get better security of supply for the organization. And with the volatility in geopolitical landscapes comes economic volatility, of course, and being able to find a way to at least mitigate cost hikes that we've seen. And finally, a shift in regulatory demands requiring greater transparency, the need to comply with new sustainability legislation, and more latterly, of course, import-export legislation. So, as if that wasn't enough, CPOs have also been battling with lots of internal challenges, including talent shortages, and we've seen a real shortage in really experienced procurement people that have those advanced procurement skills, that have the necessary digital fluency, and of course the soft skills to be able to engage with the wider business. And that, coupled with the internal complexity and CPOs wrestling with stakeholders demanding that ERP systems work better than they do, poor compliance with procurement policy, and also having to wrestle with this widened scope that we've seen, and reductions in headcount at the same time. Add to that misalignment with what the organization is battling with. So if the organization is dealing with aggressive competition, market volatility, increased regulations, and the board has a new agenda, then what we've seen is quite often in procurement, what procurement has done hasn't realigned itself at all, or hasn't realigned itself quick enough. Finally, the priorities of procurement have shifted. All of this combines to give a huge shift in what procurement is there to do, and crucially, the value that procurement can add or should be adding, and what the board now needs from procurement. So we're at this inflection point, the pivot or perish inflection point. And moving forward, we're going to see some pioneers emerging. And this is what we're going to get into in our discussion in just a moment, because those pioneers will do some unique things. They will have advanced, hire, and retain strategies. So being able to source the elite procurement people that think strategically, can operate as an entrepreneur, have advanced category management, supplier relationship management, sustainability skills, can be creative, can be innovative. Clear scope, KPIs, and governance that align with the risk of the business, that are able to to drive the centralized policies and processes across the business in a way that stakeholders buy into, and KPIs that align with the income statement and talk the language of a CFO. It will be a data and AI enabled strategic function. Everybody says that. Actually making that happen in a way that's going to do something meaningful is a very different challenge. And the final point before we get into our panelists is what we're calling a democratized operating model, which is about having procurement at the point where the routine automated spend for generic, non-differentiated spend can be executed on a self-serve model with key stakeholders, and then multidisciplinary teams that are able to focus on the strategic, high-value stuff that's going to bring that competitive advantage to the organization. So that's a sort of summary of where we're at, where we've come from, and what organizations will need to do moving forward. And to try and unpack that, we're going to talk to our panelists now. Just before we do that, just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat feature. But I'm going to start, Kathleen, with a question for you, if I may, and that is, why do you think that procurement value is becoming diluted now or is underperforming now? What is it that you think has changed in recent times that's caused us to go backwards or lose traction? What are the key challenges here?
It's a really interesting question, Jonathan, and there's no doubt about it. Procurement has made enormous strides since the pandemic in terms of developing more value-add activities and mitigating risks, and actually becoming involved in the forefront of corporate strategy. And we've seen that in many examples. In fact, Ernst & Young just reported this year on their CPO report that 64% of procurement organizations are aligned with the strategy that took part in the survey, of course. So procurement organizations are starting to understand the broader remit. And it's automation processes that have set expectations with the board and with the executive team of doing more with the same or indeed less. But the consequence is this: it's a high octane mix of multiple priorities that are coming into play now. And Spend Matters recently reported that 70% of CPOs feel that their effectiveness as a business partner has reduced due to these multiple priorities. So it's an interesting backdrop of competitive tension, if you will, in an organization where many functions are managing their own streams of change. They're trying to adapt to becoming more agile, getting the top line performance moving, getting the bottom line performance improving, and becoming more competitive against the backdrop of these geopolitical and economic tensions. So all the functions in the organization are in competition for talent because they're all sourcing, individuals with digital capability now. They're looking for business advisors and more elite talent to get into strategic advisory roles. So these tensions actually displace the priorities of procurement, naturally so. And all end users want and stakeholders, they want a simple, easy uptake process. And they want to be able to connect and work with procurement in a seamless way. So the agenda becomes somewhat diluted. And there's some interesting stats just to bear in mind. 41% of decision makers find the adoption of systems difficult. That's reported by KPMG. 32% of decision makers report that P2P is fully integrated into their ERP systems. That's by Amazon Business. 39% are highly coordinated with their partners. That's Amazon Business. And 85% of CPOs are finding difficulty in sourcing to the ESG targets and objectives of the business. That's Amazon Business reporting as well. So I believe that there's great intention for the remit. I just think that there's a lack of clarity on the business model and a lack of capacity within procurement organisations to deliver that remit.
And that echoes the sorts of things I've heard from CPOs in recent years. You used the word complexity a lot there, and I think we can't really overemphasize how complex and how difficult it has been. And in terms of what the priorities of procurement are, Dipesh, I'm going to come to you if I may, because you are a finance person. You work at that executive level, and procurement is a function that needs to deliver what you need. So do you think procurement is lagging behind right now?
I'd say that yes, they are. But mirroring what Kath says there, organisations are faced with doing more for less. I think it was mentioned several times. Competing priorities with a lack of sort of investment into ERP, people and process. Procurement have definitely fallen behind from that perspective. The fight for investment in organisations is huge. It leads us to the position we're in now, to be honest. But with more and more coming into scope, there needs to be a step change with decisive action by sort of CPOs to upskill their teams and technologies to deliver the value-adding procurement activity that we normally would have seen. I think that lag behind, in my eyes, I think procurement needs to shift from being a cost center to becoming the value add and innovation partner, or really do risk being left behind. There's the mention of complexity comes from data and strategy and risk. So coordinating a procurement strategy that works and is therefore paramount to the value adding activity. I think that's what I'd probably say about procurement lagging behind.
And so a shift from cost to innovation, is there anything else that you would say that you need procurement to deliver to you?
I think I look to my procurement colleagues frequently with ever-growing pressures on delivering savings. That decision-making process, which then leads into risk mitigation and right-sizing of operational and capital costs, is pretty key. And that information is generally driven by data. But truly, from a finance perspective, I do look to my procurement team to provide me with transparent and validated view of the life cycle of the supplier and the supply chain to drive the opportunity that is out there, drive that cost reduction, but also provide the detailed analytics that go alongside it, to solve the challenges that business faces. I think finance has been transforming slowly. Like Kath mentioned again, everyone's got their own stream of change going on. So not only are we looking for the pound saving, but we also show the curiosity and interest to cement our knowledge of speaking the same language across the organisation to avoid the misunderstanding and frustration that's commonly shown to finance and procurement by our stakeholders. And that softer information is really important. And I do believe that procurement are, the holders of that. And they should really be embedded in the business and the decision-making cycle, whilst remaining responsive and intuitive to what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think overall, I trust, that procurement works of hand in glove with finance and ops to demonstrate the cost reduction and some of that risk mitigation and tactical change that we look for.
Yeah, and a word you used a lot in that was should. Procurement should, which I think sort of, that speaks volumes about where we're perhaps lagging behind right now. And I think that the other thing you said was validated view of suppliers, which sounds an easy thing to do. Probably one of the hardest things that procurement has to wrestle with, because that assumes you've got the talent, it assumes you're doing strategic procurement, it assumes you have access to the data and you can interpret it, which of course all of those things are some of the hardest things. Kathleen, if I may sort of just follow on that theme, and at risk of beating up the CPO a little bit more, would you say CPOs are delivering what executive teams expect from procurement right now?
I think we should just take a little step back and say what do they actually expect, and drill down a little bit more. So, of course, they expect more for the same from one angle, but it's about delivering. And I read a really interesting line: delivering competitive weapons. And I thought that was a really good strapline, really. Basically, decoded means great, robust sources of supply to give them edge, competitive edge. So it's allowing the business to manage the shock waves that are coming in geopolitically and economically. It's helping them scale up, helping them optimize EBIT through savings, showcasing their compliance and regulatory performance, agility and adaptability to risk situations, easy interfaces of supply, readily available data that's accurate and predictory, and strategic advice from an elite team. And they're looking for total costs, alternative sources of supply, who are the most important, why are they most important, where are they being, where are we getting sources from, how do we avoid risk, how do we get intelligence upstream and manage margins downstream, how do we switch over, is it easy to switch over, and how do we deliver and deploy cost reduction. I'm sure these are all common themes that many of the participants can understand. But still, we get these reports of our CPOs delivering, and CFOs still see cost reduction as the #1 defense strategy. So that's what they want first. But they want everything else as well. And CFOs, interestingly, want to translate sustainability into monetary terms too. And so we've got 50% of decision makers cannot find alternative sources of supply. 77% can't access goods spend data real time. 39% of procurement organizations aren't coordinated highly with IT, finance, legal, and compliance. And so these are the sort of stats that are coming in from reports right now. So I would say that CPOs are delivering some, but not all. They understand the remit, they're under-resourced, under-integrated in the business, and some risk definitely falling behind the inflection point that you mentioned earlier.
So it's almost like if you're a CPO, you've got to deliver everything, but you're going to have your hands tied behind your back.
Indeed.
So, it's tough right now. And I think when I talk to CPOs, they say it's tough. They perhaps haven't expressed it in that way, but this is really sort of helping to bring some really good clarity here. Dipesh, I'm going to come back to you, if I may, because you sit outside procurement, and there's something around how the CPO kind of interprets what is needed, but also what the focus of the CPO should be. So, we use that phrase a lot, but of course we know what it means. But should the CPO be the chief partner officer? Should it be the chief policy officer? Is it the chief process officer to make sure that the transactional stuff can work? Is it the chief projects officer, or is it the chief prediction officer, or is it all of those? What is the main sort of focus for you?
I think the references above really do demonstrate, the ever-broadening remit of a CPO, who I personally see as, a trusted business partner to all stakeholders, whether they're, C-suite or below. And I think a successful CPO orchestrates value add. From a finance perspective, that's at the forefront of my mind, but also, risk awareness, ESG awareness, and, deep commercial understanding, and who's technologically aware, who has the ability to drive, a multifaceted team in line with the org strategy. I think that's a real big thing. And I think all of those phrases are applicable to every CPO. I think some of the areas where they drive agile and the ability with a well-versed team, is a really, really big thing. So not only do I think that it's a procurement officer, but I do definitely believe that CPOs shouldn't be referenced as just the buyers of the organisation. I think there's got to be a visual shift from everybody else, all other stakeholders and the board and C-suite, to be able to see that they are strategic architects of value. I think that's a phrase that sort of stuck with me over the last couple of years. So yeah.
And that's a really beautiful phrase. I'm just writing that down, strategic architects of value, because, I think there is a need for a visual shift there around it being more than a procurement role. We actually saw this with sustainability, because it's the one thing that suddenly put procurement as the sort of central point in an organization to help an organization become sustainability way beyond traditional procurement activity. And of course, tech and AI has a place there. Dipesh, do you think procurement's doing enough to adopt digital tech and AI right now?
I think it's a very, very steep learning curve for everybody. It's not just procurement that are left behind. There's a significant amount of structured, unstructured data, financial, non-financial. It's a bit like trying to service a car while it's still moving. We just don't get the time to stop, rethink, reevaluate. And that goes for everyone, and not just leaders of the organisation. But to build for the future and be successful is a must. The investment in the procurement landscape is already sort of without a leg. It's legacy systems, it's low quality in data, it's under resourced. That doesn't help. But I think all the procurement teams out there should adopt technology, even if it has limitations. But understand the limitations. Don't just stop at it being okay. Can't do anything more with it. But I think it requires the learning and development of teams, and there needs to be a desire to learn and develop at the same time to build what you said at the beginning of the call. The agile and multi-skilled teams that should be out there. I do find that procurement are utilizing digital and AI and tools, but there are just so many out there. Is knowing what's best and what's best practice to continue using. But fundamentally, finance are using them. The ops teams are probably using them too. So the procurement function should be leaning on their business partners to learn from, master and collaborate effectively, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's really interesting just in terms of that digital adoption piece. So easy to say that, so hard to actually make it happen. And add to that what you just said, the landscape is very confused. Knowing what to do and where to start is a real challenge. Now, I want to just talk about the kind of methodologies we use, because in the last years that I've done this, I've been working with companies doing strategic procurement, so driving category management in organizations, driving supplier relationship management in organizations, helping drive in advanced negotiation capability. And those are things that traditionally need really well-trained people, need a really good methodology, good governance behind it to ensure you've got the right process rigor. Yet recently, I see organizations say, hey, we don't need to do any of that stuff. We just need a magic button, which of course doesn't exist. It will, but increasingly we're working towards a much more digital environment where those processes can be assisted with that. But for me, it feels that we still need people who have the capability of doing that. So, Kathleen, what do you think? Is there still a place for those sort of strategic staples of procurement, category management, SRM, or can we have a magic button? Can AI just take over and do this?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I would say absolutely, the staples remain. AI enables, it doesn't replace. And the idea of freeing up headcount to actually get involved in the more strategic, proactive, predictive advisory roles is where it's at. And the bedrock of procurement is, very healthy, very detailed, and structured category strategies. That is just, meat and bread to the whole purpose of the function. In fact, Ernst & Young were reporting that category management and strategic sourcing are key investments before sustainability. tasks and actions. So cost management and supply chain resilience is really, really key, and that's not going to go away. I think the focus is on rapid automation to remove the low value add repeat tasks that are in place. And we should be seeing, and we are seeing in many organizations where invoice matching and e-tendering are part of the norm now, and the uptake on that technology is in place. But as we move forward over the next 5 years, we should be seeing a lot more activity in automation and prediction data coming in around sourcing strategies and the whole process end to end. AI agents and machine learning that you mentioned earlier, we should use to augment category management. And in fact, the 5 skills gaps that are present in several surveys that I've been involved and read about recently are category management, supplier relationship management, ESG, data analytics and digital fluency, and AI utilization and digitization. So they're the skills gaps that are there, and that mirrors the requirements still in place for procurement organizations now and in the future.
And I got this vision of this scene from Mission Impossible. I haven't seen the latest film yet, but with all the different data and suppliers and supply chains and what's happening in the organization all there, and the procurement people of the future just moving this stuff around to be able to get the insights and be able to tell the board exactly what they need. Which I think brings us neatly on to people. And I think this is probably the last sort of question for you both, which is, how do people figure in Procurement 3.0, the new operating model of the future? You know, what is the role, but more importantly, how do we get that right talent? How do we get the right skills? We know we've just heard that we need them, but how do we get them? What do organizations have to do? And Dipesh, I'm going to ask you first, please.
I think we've realised that people are still essential, and having the right level of investment into people is definitely essential too. But I think there's probably quite a lot that we can do. Making sure that we've got those job descriptions set up in a way to retain talent, and having a strategy behind learning and development, I think is key. But also not taking our eyes off thinking outside the box a little bit. A procurement person doesn't just need to have a procurement background. They can be from finance. That's extremely supportive of the right model for the future. If those skills are present, it's really, really useful. And I also think building that technological and financial awareness in the entire organization is a good thing. It's never a bad thing.
Kathleen?
This is a topic that I could talk a lot about, so I'll try and keep it as punchy as I can. But the new operating model and people within it it's about resilience and adaptive agility and an integrated approach in the business, and inclusive cultures and a total cost of operation approach. And you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, that it should be led from the center, adding value and innovation. So innovation, adding value, futuristic, predictive are all the things that are coming into play. But how can people get involved in that? Well, imagine the IMF unit from Mission Impossible. They need intelligence, they need technology and kit, and they need highly skilled operatives on the ground to deploy the tasks that they wish to take them and take the mission. But, I can see a future where teams are involved in agile projects that are on an as needed basis. They're involved in critical complex spends where there's a big focus on SRM and category management there. They're involved in supporting self-service systems and interfaces and integration and rollout, procurement excellence and ESG programs, and then also involved in the analytics and the mosaic of systems that are behind the scenes to create a seamless, high-quality service and P2P process. Now, that all sounds glamorous and very easy to do. It just isn't. And procurement officers of the future will have to have a great plan in place, a great business plan signed off at the board level and the executive team buy-in to create a culture, a connected culture with stakeholders to attract the talent for the future and retain them. So Dipesh mentioned earlier, having an invested skills development program, that's absolutely necessary. But people will only come to the departments if they feel there's some plan in place and where procurement is valued and there is development for the future for them.
And I'm so happy to hear you both say that, because it means there's a place for what we've been doing all these years, and that will continue. So I'm very happy about that. We're going to move to some questions now. Thank you for some of the questions that you've shared. If you do have a question, please put it on the Q&A chat feature. Stephen Levson, thank you. How is AI actually being used in procurement? Not the theory, but the reality. Are RFP documents being drafted by AI and reviewed, edited, and published by humans? Kathleen, one for you, I think.
I've certainly seen examples of this in the very early stages. So yes, it is happening. There is more human intervention that I would like to see. So I'd like to see it more end-to-end, seamlessly automated. But yes, there are good examples of that out there at the moment in some of the leading organisations. I'd like to see more, obviously.
Brilliant. Thank you. Alex Craven, thank you for your question. Should procurement help to influence business strategy or merely execute? Dipesh, what do you think?
Absolutely influence it. It should just be executing it all. I think the moment that you see procurement on the sideline, it's a car crash waiting to happen. I think it's definitely a good way for an organisation to work. Like I said before, hand in glove with everybody and everything. Procurement should have a mitts over everything. If they don't, then it's likely to go horribly wrong somewhere on the bottom line.
And still time to put a question in the Q&A chat feature. A couple of other questions that came in via the other chat. And Dipesh, I think this is one for you. This is, how can procurement leaders demonstrate measurable value to the board beyond cost savings for the non-financial benefits?
Good question. I think some of the non-financial elements around risk, ESG, the ability to demonstrate those things has to be really succinct. But I think a lot of it needs to be very efficient in the way that we mention that. And procurement are there you have the information in front of you, especially when you're talking to suppliers and through those sourcing strategies that are being utilised on a day-to-day basis. So having a team that's well versed and is able to speak the language for C-suite, board, anybody who else, any other stakeholders in the organisation is really, really key.
Thank you. One on sustainability. Kathleen, I think this is for you. This is from Simon Westling. What role does sustainability play in the modernisation of procurement practices, and how can technology support compliance and innovation in this area?
Good question. Now that businesses are actually proud of their sustainability commitments, and it's incumbent on the procurement organisation to support that and demonstrate transparency of sources of supply and the integrity with which we do it. So the whole idea of auditing, selecting suppliers, auditing suppliers right down to level 3, level 4 in the supply chain. Technology can enable us to do that, and it is necessary in global organizations. But it's so intensive in terms of resourcing. So the business needs to put money where its mouth is and actually support that function, both from a technology point of view and a resourcing point of view, a headcount point of view, because I've seen great examples of where we can get down to layers 2 and 3 maybe, on the top suppliers, but for the entire portfolio of suppliers that are important to a business. 1, selecting ESG compliant suppliers, 2, maintaining and auditing them, and 3, giving compliant, transparent information real time to the business in order to make decisions. That is a big ask, and it is a hungry beast. So the technology's out there to do that. The ideas and the methodologies are out there, the skills are out there, but they are limited. and they're in close competition as well. So it's not a myth. It does occur. It is necessary. And for businesses to move forward and keep ahead of the curve, we need to take that extremely seriously and translate that into board reporting, because the board is extremely proud of its efforts around ethical and sustainable practices.
Definitely. And I think we've got time for one more. Stephen Levson, again, thank you. How do we as educators at the post-secondary level prepare students for the brave new world of procurement? What are the specific skills, tools? What would you like to see students learning before graduation? That's a really good question. I think we should all have a go at answering that one. I'm going to start, if I may, because I think the best skills that somebody can learn pre-grad as they're graduating, pre-graduation, post-graduation, engaging with people, being able to engage with the business and the business skills, because everything else can be learned, but it's that ability to be able to understand how business works, understand how change works, and to engage with people. Dipesh, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd say one word really is empathy. Without it, you can't really develop in the world of business. That's my take on it. I completely think that stakeholders are always looking to have a bit of empathy towards others, and you get better results with having a person who's personable.
Yeah, really, really good answer. Kathleen, finally?
For me, I think it's the ability to, again, these are softer skills, problem solve and manage conflict.
Brilliant.
So for me, I think we've all talked about the softer skills, the people skills, the connection and becoming the bridge between the internal world and the external world.
Yeah.
The rest, the technical aspects of learning how to develop strategies and become digitally fluent, I think that comes with practice and with training.
Yeah, I often maintain that the best procurement people are the non-procurement people. So it's those other skills that I think kind of really make it. So we're just about out of time. There's a couple of things just to share with you before we finish. I'm really sorry if we didn't manage to answer your question. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Please make a note of the contact information because we'd really love to hear from you. We've recorded this, so if you have hung in there to the end, and thank you so much for doing that, you will get a copy of the recording of this. The other thing that you'll get is a white paper that Kathleen has written, which takes the topic of today's webinar and takes it to an incredible level of detail with a real roadmap for how organizations can tackle revolutionizing procurement. So we'll email you about that separately, and that'll be coming out very, very soon. Before we finish, I'd just like to have a shameless plug of the Procurement Show podcast. If you haven't heard it, we've got some great guests on there. The current one is the head of sustainability for Bayer, and just search the Procurement Show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or ask your smart speaker to play the Procurement Show. But a real thank you to Kathleen Harmeston, thank you to Dipesh, thank you all for listening and being part of this. We really hope that it's made a difference in some way, and thank you for your contributions as well. And good luck with heading towards Procurement 3.0. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.